So all of you started on the left. Can you tell us a little bit about what appealed to you about the left initially?
Well, I think for me, I was a Democrat for 20 years. I grew up in Vermont, and there was never an election that I could vote for Bernie Sanders, that I didn't vote for Bernie Sanders up until 2020. So I think for me, growing up in Vermont is one of those things where you literally just don't meet Republicans, to be honest. I remember when Vermont started going totally left, and it was around 1992 when Bill Clinton got elected. And I was really young at that point. I was 10 years old. And so from there forward, I literally just had no interactions with Republicans or certainly even with like libertarians. And what appealed to me about the Democrats was, free speech is basically my number one issue. I am very much a proponent of pushing the bounds of speech, what is acceptable speech, because I believe that the only way that speech is protected for everyone is when we are able to protect the most deplorable speech imaginable. I remember being, 14, 15 years old and seeing, learning about how the ACLU had defended actual Nazis and actual members of the KKK, not because they agreed with their speech, but because they knew that you have to protect the worst possible speech in order to protect speech for everyone. After all, speech that everyone agrees with is not speech that needs to be protected. And so this was during the 90s when, I look back at the 90s and I remember the Republican kind of moral majority that were trying to censor the music I could listen to and the video games I could play and the art I could look at. And I was like, no, I want nothing to do with that. And so that's basically why I became a Democrat then.
I'm from Berkeley, California, so I really didn't have a choice. I was born into a very liberal family, or as I like to call them, white wine liberals. So they're basically the white families who live behind gay communities and have those little signs in their front yard saying we believe in science, we believe in diversity and all that stuff, which is great, awesome, but they would basically talk about all their politics as a way to make up for the fact that they really had no idea what was going on, despite there was horrible wars going on, people were being killed across seas with taxpayer money, that sort of things. But I basically grew up in Berkeley, California, where I attended my first anti-Bush protest at the age of, I think, 8. I was basically born into the liberal atmosphere. And even when I was going door to door for Ron Paul at 16, I was one of the youngest people to go to door to door for Ron Paul, I still considered myself a liberal, but because most of what Ron Paul used to talk about, I considered liberal ideas. So that's basically what I was a Democrat, I guess.
Yeah, I had a similar upbringing where I went to a public school, a good public school in upstate New York, and the only perspective that we were really taught was the democratic perspective. That, of course the government cares for everybody and that's an important thing to do, and if you are a Republican, it means that you don't care about poor people. And it took a long time for me to kind of realize that it's not the state's authority to take care of poor people. In fact, private organizations have been doing it for most of human history. And so for me, being a Democrat was something I was born into, and something that I very much took pride in as like an upstanding member of society.
Is there a moment that you can pinpoint when you started to feel uncomfortable identifying as a Democrat?
Yes. It was when social justice took over my knitting community. And and I know that sounds funny, but it's kind of the same thing you saw at Gamergate or anything else, where basically there were these roving mobs of social justice warriors running around the online knitting world, demanding that owners in the knitting community say the right words or not say the words that they didn't want them to say. And it sounds funny, but it really did get so bad that it ended up with one guy who got bullied and harassed so badly by thousands and thousands of people online that he actually had a nervous breakdown and ended up in the hospital on suicide suicide watch. And it's still going on today. There's still, and this is like 2.5 years later. And so I saw this happening in the knitting world, and I'd studied workplace bullying for my doctorate. And so I know bullying when I see it, and I was like, this is not cool. And there was a process of realizing that this is the group of people that I had politically aligned myself with, and that started a whole journey of cognitive dissonance for several months after that, until I ended up going to a Donald Trump rally on the eve of the New Hampshire primary in 2020, and realized how much the media had lied to me about who Trump supporters were. I wasn't necessarily like totally on board with Trump, but I was like, the media are evil and they are lying to all of us, and these are not bad people. In fact, they were really welcoming to me. And so that was kind of the moment for me when I was like, this is all nonsense.
So I think the time that I realized I was sort of against being a Democrat was during Obama's second term, when those drone strikes happened. And my parents, who constantly talk about being anti-war, how much they hated Bush, how much they hated Vietnam, they said they were going to vote for him. They said they were going to support him throughout the second term. And I said, Mom, Dad, didn't you just hear what he just did? It's awful. And they pretty much had no idea what I was talking about, or at least dismissed it. I think I was about 13 or 14 years old during this time, and that's when I realized that I could never align with the Democratic Party, because at the end of the day, they're all run by warmongers, left and right. So that's when I really started investigating, my time online as a kid, 14-year-old with no friends, but playing a lot of World of Warcraft. That's when I discovered a lot of conspiracy theories and the wonders of the Libertarian Party, and I ended up being one of the youngest people to go door to door for Ron Paul in California. So that's...
Yeah, Obama betrayed me as well. I worked on his campaign. I passed out lit. I got signatures. I got donations. In fact, I donated as well. I have like a little toiletry bag that says "Women for Obama" right on it. And it's a really nice bag, so I still use it, but it hurts a little every time.
I remember the first time I really supported Obama. I was about 13 years old. And that's when he was first running. And it was like, either it's the guy who supports the gays or this fascist racist, which, let's be honest, the guy he was running against at the time in 2008 was a trash fire. And, I'm happy the gays can get married. Good for them. But at the end of the day, nothing really changed other than under Obama, more than continuing Bush's war. I mean, nothing changed, nothing got better, especially for liberals and Democrats. And I'm just surprised that we keep propping up Obama as this great Democrat president, this great liberal president, when the truth is, the most we got out of Obama was showing up on Ellen. Like, that man was on talk shows more than any other.
He is a great dancer.
Do you know what I'm saying? No, he was on talk shows more than any other president and did nothing.
He promised to close Guantanamo Bay. You know what I mean? This is the United States of America committing war crimes, actual war crimes, and we'd been doing it for decades. And one of his campaign promises was to close Guantanamo Bay, and he never did it. And so within about 6 months of his election, I was like, you could do it. You just have to sign a piece of paper. And he didn't. And so it was in 2008, 2009 that I had my aha moment where I decided, this is a guy who made promises, and just like every single other politician in the last 100 years, he's going to break them.
Well, you know what happened 100 years ago? The Federal Reserve was founded.
Federal Reserve.
Well, I want to say on this too, do you guys notice that all of the anti-war protests stopped after George W. Bush left office? I was in college when 9/11 happened. I distinctly remember being one of those people that I was protesting the war in Iraq on the Boston Common, getting called all manner of hateful things for daring to speak against George W. Bush. And then the minute that W was out of office, all of the protests went away. And then it's not like the war has ended, but the protests went away, which is an interesting thing to
I
look
watched
back
a lot of Jon Stewart, and so he was this voice of satire against Bush and against the Republicans, and so you felt very edgy as a leftist.
Yes.
Oh, I'm being subversive. And then Obama kind of took advantage, I think, of that that movement of it's cool to be left. It's not just for old rich white guys, it's also for the cool young kids. And he took that, and then he just profited off of it and did absolutely nothing to make any of those promises come true.
Obama is a Republican with a blue tie. That's all he is. And the thing is there's so
He's
many
like a
things,
token Republican.
Exactly. There's so many things that politicians left and right could have done to save this country, but just by signing a piece of paper, whether it's closing Guantanamo Bay or Trump pardoning Julian Assange or Ross Ulbricht, and they just didn't do it. And they could have just done it within a matter of seconds, and they just didn't. And it makes you wonder, they make all these promises to do things that could be handled in a matter of seconds, but they won't do it. And why is that? Because these politicians do not care about us from the Democrat Party or the Republican Party.
Yes.
They just don't.
Okay, so you were betrayed by Obama. You were tired of getting censored in your knitting group. The Democrats, we're no good. We live in America, of course. There's another option to being a Democrat. You have to be a Republican, right? How was that transition for you?
Well, I mean, that was very weird because so after I went to that Trump rally, I posted an article on the internet basically describing my experience of being a former Democrat at a Trump rally, and it accidentally went viral. And when it did, I became like the conservative darling for like 15 minutes. I was the one they were holding up as like, we got a Democrat to lead the left. Like PragerU even made a video about my story, and I went along with all of it because I was like, this is the right thing to do. I want people to understand that like these are not evil people, even though I never actually considered myself a conservative or a Republican. I ended up, touring with the Walkaway campaign around the country in 2020, trying to get people to leave the Democratic Party. But what the Walkaway campaign said then was it was a journey, not a destination. And I very much believe that this was true at the time, where they weren't trying to purposefully funnel people into the conservative movement. I think that has since changed because they know where their fundraising is coming from. But I was very much just like about people need to understand that the Democrats are evil and they need to wake up and see what the media is doing to them. And so I was very much involved with the MAGA movement in 2020, and I didn't even consider the libertarians as an option. And the reason, and looking back, I'm a little bit upset with myself for taking one single tweet that Joe Jorgensen sent and immediately writing off the entire Libertarian Party. But you guys have to understand, like in Dallas, Texas, at a Walkaway rally, I was literally chased by a Black Lives Matter mob down the street, and it went viral on the internet, and it was a deeply traumatic experience, if I'm honest about it. And so to see the presidential candidate for the Libertarians tweet out Black Lives Matter, I was like, F you guys, I can't consider you at all. And so I looked at the Republicans and I was like, they're not great, they're imperfect people, but they're the only things that I have. And then after kind of Joe Biden got inaugurated, I was very lucky to have the Mises Caucus recruiters in New Hampshire reach out to me and take me out for a beer and a pretzel and to say, look, we're not all Black Lives Matter like woke leftists. There is a different option for you in the Libertarian Party. And I was really thrilled to find it, to be honest, because if I had known about the Mises Caucus and what they were doing in the Libertarian Party in 2020, I would have been there in a second and it wouldn't have even been a question. So that's kind of, I took kind of a haphazard way where I joined the Republican Party for about 15 minutes, mostly to spite the Republican nominee for Delaware, who literally called for Senate in Delaware, who literally called for my husband to be deported on Twitter, which if you've never had a Republican politician call for your family members to be deported, that's an interesting experience. And so I basically joined the Republican Party just to spite her, and then joined the Libertarians not too long after that.
Oh gosh, okay, so my story is very similar, where I was kind of held up on a pedestal of being like the Trump little blonde darling. So as I mentioned before, I am from Berkeley, California. I am Bay Area born and raised, a very liberal area, and it was funny because even during my time of supporting Ron Paul, I still considered myself a liberal and a leftist. I never really considered myself, I don't know, I just never thought of right wing versus left wing up until the Trump movement, honestly. I never really heard of anything like it until the Trump movement. And so during that time, I wasn't a fan of Trump. I didn't vote for Trump in 2016, but I remember when he was elected into office after his inauguration, there was just tons of protests in the Bay Area, especially across UC Berkeley campus. And what had happened was, I remember a lot of students getting up the day after Trump was elected and getting up and standing up and walking out of class. And just after that, that's when chaos happened. And that's when people started posting pictures of, no, you know what happened first, actually? It was the Milo riots that happened first. I remember walking from the library, and the first thing I see is little fireworks being shot up in the air, and I'm being told on Twitter, and I'm checked, and like the news is just going off on my phone, basically saying there's riots on UC Berkeley campus, things are going crazy, so I'm a little freaked out because I hear screaming and crashing, and there's a fire going on. Next to it, there's a march. It's weird. You look in one corner, and there is like a building being set on fire, and the corner over, there is people playing with a marching band. It is the most confusing thing happening. You have no idea how to handle it, but that's basically Berkeley for you. And I should be used to this, but I'm not. Like, this is the most strange thing I've ever experienced. And so the first thing I do is I pull out my phone, and I start recording, because I'm not sure what to make of this. I had barely known who Milo Yiannopoulos was at the time. I didn't know who he really, like what he talked about. I just knew these people hated him. So I pulled out my phone, started recording people smashing windows, lighting off fireworks, all this crazy stuff, and the only news source that would take my footage was Fox News. The problem is I hate Fox News. I hate them so much, but they said, hey, will you come on to our show, blah, blah, and I was like, sure, why not? And they told me you can't, ridicule the cops, despite the fact that the cops were told by the Berkeley mayor to stand down and watch people get smashed in the face. And I mean, I have seen, and this isn't just the one occurrence, I have seen so many rallies in Berkeley, California, where you see some alt-right guy stab an Antifa person, or some just bypasser getting punched in the face by an Antifa person, and he's covered in blood. I've seen like there's that one guy who got hit in the head by a bike with a bike lock, and all he had to do was put his hands up and try to stop things from happening. I mean, I've seen these two groups go at each other, and the police have done nothing to try to save someone's life. And they've got their shields, they've got their pepper sprayed, nothing. I've called out the Berkeley mayor, I've called out the Oakland mayor, I've gone to the dean of students of UC Berkeley, and they just do not care. They totally lied to the media about what's actually going on, and this is an issue for both left and right, because you see these people on the left and the right fighting, trying to smash each other in the face, and nothing's being done about it. Anyway, fast forwarding, I do my interview with Fox News, I talk about what's happening. I censor myself as much as possible for Fox News, which I hated more than anything. But then, as time goes by, I get a call from my friend, and she's like, you went on Fox News. That's an anti-woman that's an anti-woman news group. You can't go on Fox News. And I'm like, well, why not? Like, I was basically talking about what happened. She goes, you can't do that. So then over time, as time goes by, everyone's basically blaming the Berkeley College Republicans for inviting Milo. They're calling them fascists, they're calling them Nazis. There's pictures of them being posted all over campus of their names, their faces, what they're studying, where they live, all of this crazy stuff. And I'm like, this is insane. I have got to see who these people are. I go to one meeting, and these people are basically like, yeah, we just voted for Trump because we hate Hillary. We don't want, to get involved with foreign interference. We hate taxes. That's it. And I'm like, okay, well, it's good to know there's no Nazis on my campus. And so I walk out of my classroom, someone takes a picture of me and basically doxes my name, my face, and says that I am a Nazi. And next thing you know, everyone I know knows. My family finds out about this. My employer finds out about this. I'm barred from my stand-up comedy bar that I used to do comedy at. I'm barred from my improv group. It sucks. And at this point in time, I'd always consider myself more on the liberal side. So I retaliated by essentially putting on a MAGA hat and saying, if you're gonna cancel me, I'm just gonna cancel myself, and you're all stupid, which in itself was a very dumb thing to do. Now, the problem with me making this decision is that for the next 2 years of my life, I was angry with the left telling me who I could be friends with and what I could talk about. The problem is for the next 2 years of my life, I ended up signing up to work for a media company, a specific media company. Now, this is not me targeting all leftists, all conservatives, all Republicans, all Democrats. This is just my experience with this one media company. This media company basically told me I couldn't talk badly about the cops. I couldn't talk about what's happening in the Middle East between Palestine and Israel. I couldn't insult wars that were perpetrated that were, in favor of the Republican Party or whatnot. I very much had to be this GOP Barbie doll. And that hurt me for a very long time. I officially signed off with that media company in the summer of 2019. I left, I took a break from conservative, all sorts of politics, all media altogether, and just wanted to reevaluate where I actually stood in politics. And it's funny enough, because what got me back to where I am right now was the George Floyd protests. and I went to a Black Lives Matter protest in the town that I was living in, and I ended up, just talking with these Black Lives Matter protests, these Trump supporters, people from both sides. And this is one thing the media will never show you, is that at that protest, I saw someone in a Trump hat and a guy in a Black Lives Matter shirt actually have a real conversation with one another, shake hands, and then hug. Would the media report on this? No, they don't want to talk about these things because they don't want us to recognize that we're actually all Americans, we're all human beings trying to make the world a better place and trying to understand what's going on. Because we're all being lied to. And that's when I realized both parties are trash, they're all full of warmongers, they're all paid off by the corporate elite, and they all want you dead.
So I kind of got invited onto this panel late. I went directly from Obama betrayed me to all politicians are thieves and liars.
Because you're smarter than we were.
Yes, you're smarter than us, Rachel. We know.
So I went straight to anarchy. Thank you. The next part you may not like, I got swept up in the Occupy Wall Street movement. So at the beginning of that, it was incredibly decentralized, and it was essentially this swell of people who were frustrated that the government was funding foreign wars, that the government was imprisoning people for nonviolent crimes, that the government was allowing us to vote and then taking our money and doing things with it that we didn't want. And so it never culminated with those ideas as a grander movement. But for me, I found Michael Huemer's book, The Problem of Political Authority, which discussed the fallacy of the social contract. And from there, I found the Free State Project. And from there, my partner and I moved here, and I became the president of the Free State Project. So although I was never fetishized by the conservative party at large, I did end up kind of using this platform as a way to take my betrayal with the left and find a way to give it an outlet. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a couple of topics that have come up are the kind of identitarian censorship and social circles. On the left also has issues with who you associate with, like even talking to Fox News or Milo was an issue. You've also mentioned that both sides are warmongers and rely on these faulty financial institutions. What topics do you think are not covered in this left-right paradigm that are really resonant with women?
With women specifically?
Yeah, since you're ladies and...
So maybe I can speak. I know neither of you guys have kids in a family, which is great, but and I'm so jealous at times. But from the perspective of a mom with young kids, I can say health freedom is a huge thing that neither of the parties can even approach because they're both being paid off by big pharma. And so when I talk about health freedom, it starts all the way from pregnancy. Hospitals and OBGYNs and anybody who encourages, fertility practices, et cetera, all direct you immediately to become over-medicalized. This isn't necessary. Read a book by Emily Oster, Expecting Better, where she talks about the actual information of, what is healthy and what is not from a pregnancy standpoint. And it turns out that drinking alcohol isn't going to kill you or the baby. It's not going to turn it into a fetal alcohol syndrome monster. Smoking weed is not going to kill the baby. All of these things that doctors speak to the lowest common denominator with women instead of speaking to us as though we're humans, and that's because they have this liability, and doctors are basically government slaves. And so I think health freedom starting there, into birth, into childhood and childhood vaccines and getting your kids at the doctor's office every 6 months. And then they find out that they have this minor illness and it would be totally fine if you just let them live. And then through beyond medicalization of children and over-pharmacalizing them. Like, why are we giving kids ADHD medicine? Because the pharmaceutical companies are paying education facilities to tell you that your kids are supposed to be sitting quietly when they're kids. That's the point of them. They don't sit quietly. So over-pharmacalizing our children, putting them in masks the last 2 years has just been devastating to children. Over-vaccinating our children has been a devastation to them. And it absolutely has destroyed the family structure, has destroyed women as well. So like, okay, beyond that, right? They said certain jobs are essential, certain jobs are not. One of those jobs that was not essential was childcare. Well, all of the women who were relying on childcare all of a sudden had to quit their jobs. We saw the largest decrease of women in the workforce in the last 2 years that we've ever seen. It's worse than before World War II. So this is something that I think neither Republicans or Democrats are talking about, women and their families.
Yeah. I think I would add on to that and say that I think the Republicans are absolutely garbage on what to do with public education. I think that they do not realize, yes.
Hear, hear.
It is absolutely imperative that we decouple the state from education entirely. It is not a fixable system. And Republicans don't understand this because they think that if they are just the ones that are put in power, then they're going to be able to control the system and then they're going to be able to fix everything. And that is patently untrue. They do not look at reality when you try to tell them that this is a staffing problem. This starts in the schools of education, which is where the teachers learn to be teachers, and then they train the teachers to bring this into the classroom, starting with the children at 4 years old. And the only viable option that Republicans have given us is maybe we can do school choice, maybe kind of with vouchers that may or may not be enough to pay for what you actually need, but that is not going to fix the problem that we have in front of us. And what I find when I'm trying to work with the right is oftentimes, and we see actually, I have seen this here in New Hampshire, our Republican governor, Chris Sununu, was the person that sabotaged the anti-critical race theory bill last year when he worked with his Republican cronies in the state Senate to completely water down the bill, so that what they do is they claim that they banned critical race theory from being taught in the classroom, but what they really did was water down the bill so that critical race theory is absolutely still being taught in the classroom in New Hampshire, and they had every option to fix it, and they did not. And if you think that was a fluke, Chris Sununu just this year has said that he is going to veto the parental rights and education bill in the state, which says that parents can actually have a completely transparent access to what is going on in the school systems. That's not, the veto isn't coming from the Democrats, it's coming from the Republicans, because they are such cowards and so weak on what actually needs to be done to fix education in this country.
I'm not going to speak as a woman. I'm just going to speak in generally what I know from what we've already talked about. But when it comes down to saying, especially when you said, you know, how dare you align with this person, how dare you align, not saying that you said that, but
Yeah.
I think it comes down to the fact that we have lived in this paradigm of where if you want to be considered right wing, you can't associate with the left. If you want to be considered left wing, you can't associate with the right. And it's really weird to me because I think people are a lot more complex than simply left and right when it comes to morals. And it's very strange that every single voting session, we are told to choose between the lesser of two evils when the truth is both parties are the exact same party.
Yes.
We live in a country where the Democrats and Republicans are doing the exact same things. They're taking away fundamental rights. They're telling us how to live our lives. They're going to war, and they're making money off corporatization, right? And on top of that, the worst part of it is that they're voted in by people who might be, you know, more left or more right than the other. But the truth is that these Democrat and Republican politicians, they don't hate each other because they're working together to ruin our lives. But the people who give them the power to ruin our lives, even though we are more left and more right than each other maybe, we hate each other, but we really shouldn't, because at the end of the day, we're being screwed over by the same people. Our lives are being completely demolished by the same people, Republican and Democrat. At the end of the day, they're the ones taking away our fundamental rights, telling us how we can defend ourselves, what we can and cannot say, what our health care should be. Like, that should piss you off whether you vote for someone, whether it's a D or an R next to their name. And so my whole thing is we've got to stop having this demonization of who we associate with or who we have conversations with. Because I love people on the left and the right. I've got communist friends, I've got socialist friends, I've got right-wing friends, left-wing friends, Republican, Democrat friends. I've got friends all around. And the thing I appreciate the most about that is I've learned something important from every single one of them. But even better is when I talk to them, I find out that my left-wing friends and my right-wing friends have way more in common than they realize. If they were to just walk into a room with all these different people and not say who they vote for and what political party they associate with and just talk about their individual beliefs, they would get along so much more than they realize. Which takes me on to my next point too, is with the media. The media is like the biggest demon when it comes to all of this. By the way, right-wingers have got to stop saying CNN is Marxist, because if CNN was Marxist, they'd be a whole lot smarter. Because at least Karl Marx was in favor of owning a gun and free speech. CNN is just on a whole different level. But when it comes down to this, the media is basically telling one side that the other side's a demon. When you turn on CNN, it tells you the right wing's a demon. When you turn on Fox News, they tell you the left wing is a demon. And then we end up fighting each other in the middle of the street and not solve anything. Because every election year, we still vote for the lesser of two evils. And it doesn't matter if Trump's in office, or Biden's in office, or Clinton's in office, or Obama's in office. It's still the same bullshit. So why the hell do we keep doing this every 2 to 4 years?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When and how did the Libertarian Party catch your attention?
Well, like I said, for me, so it first caught my attention in a bad way. In that after I wrote my article and like went viral on the internet, I basically had a lot of people coming up to me saying, Karlyn, you're a libertarian, you're a libertarian, you're a libertarian. I was like, I don't know about that. The Libertarian Party kind of sucks. And to be fair, they did suck up until about a month ago, and now now we're getting things back on track, which is an eerie feeling, and I know we're all waiting for kind of the other shoe to drop, but we can cross our fingers. But no, I mean, they caught my attention in a really bad way, which is that they sounded like woke leftists, and I was like, I just left the left, I'm not joining another leftist tribe, but then I ended up getting involved with the LPNH in New Hampshire and the Mises Caucus in New Hampshire, and found out that these people are not woke leftists at all. In fact, like, we are exactly aligned on so many of the issues that I care about, and I think that making sure that people are actually, I think that Twitter is basically the bane of all of our existence. Can we all just agree that Twitter is the most horrible platform that has ever been invented? It really is, and I say that as someone who tweets a lot. I understand that, and sometimes spicier things than others. But it really, I think that we're relying so much on these big tech platforms to communicate that we are missing out on the human experience of communicating. And when I got involved with the Libertarian Party, it didn't happen over Twitter, it didn't happen over email, it happened over beer. That's where in a real in-person conversation, and then going to in-person meetups and seeing people for who they really were and getting involved that way. And I think that that's something we really need to be working on and encouraging is, taking these things off of big tech. Okay, we can have our signal groups and whatnot when we're communicating in between, but like getting off of big tech and actually seeing each other in person, I think that that's the real game changer, because you really get to see who people are when you interact with them in person. And to be honest, that's where I learned what garbage human beings a lot of people who shill Republican nonsense really are, is I met them in person and I saw what they were really saying when the cameras weren't rolling and when they didn't have a crowd that they needed to entertain on Twitter. They're saying completely different things in person than what they're saying when they have a mass audience. And so that was really the game changer for me, was just getting off of the dang internet.
So the Libertarian Party I've been aware of since I was I think like 13 or 14 years old. That's when I discovered it. Funny enough, I found the Libertarian Party. I found information about it on a World of Warcraft forum, which is the same place I discovered Alex Jones, so that's really telling. But I found the Libertarian Party when I was about 13 or 14, and I honestly wasn't too interested in it. I just really liked what Ron Paul was saying, and I sort of held on to the title for a while. Even when I was wearing the MAGA hat, I still called myself a libertarian. And now I kind of, it's funny though you mentioned the woke leftist, because it's kind of the woke leftism, I guess, that kind of brought me back to this mindset of just freedom, because what really brought me back out of the Trump stuff was going to that Black Lives Matter rally and seeing just the communication between two people of different backgrounds. And first of all, I don't know anyone's opinion on that whole, I mean, there shouldn't be an opinion on this, but there's no reason for a police officer to kneel on someone's freaking neck. I'm sorry. And so my concept of anti-war, police brutality, fighting the war on drugs, all of these things that just really just the fight for freedom overall is what brought me back here. And you know, there are some people here who are a bit more right-wing than I am, but at the end of the day, we're all fighting for freedoms to live our lives how we want, and I think that's the most important thing.
For sure. Yeah, for me, I think the LP was like a theoretical tool to deconstruct power. You know, like right now, and it's still the case, right? We have two main centers of power in America, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, and they really are just two wings on the same bird, I think is the saying. And I have a real problem with first-past-the-post voting systems. I think there are a lot of better options out there, approval voting being one of them. And so there's a number of sort of theoretical election science type articles and books written on this subject. And so for a long time, to me, it wasn't necessarily that it be the Libertarian Party. I mean, the Green Party had its day, and I think it could still. You know, there's this huge environmental movement that's been sort of co-opted by the power structure of the Democratic Party and is really doing absolutely nothing other than paying environmental scientists to tell us that plastic bags and paper straws, et cetera, and so it wasn't really until recently with the Mises Caucus that the LP started speaking in a language that actually inspired me. But I have always wanted to see more than a two-faced power structure. And so that's sort of the LP's value, in my opinion. And having a third party to vote for really means that the two parties that are in charge have to increase the nuance of their conversation and give voters more of a choice. So whether that means an actual republic, or if it means like the degradation of the federal government into complete anarchy, like both of those options are okay with me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have one question for these two ladies. Wouldn't it be just so much better if we could vote based on principles and not based on party or singular politician?
Well, I think we can vote based on principles, though. I think we always have the option to vote based on principles. I think that, you know, every single person who says that you're throwing your vote away when you vote for a third party is lying to you and is trying to pressure you into voting the way that they want you to vote rather than voting on your principles. And I think that, you know, we can always make the choice to vote for the Libertarians, vote for the Green Party, voting for no one at all can be a choice based on your principles if no one has actually earned your vote. And I think go ahead.
Oh, what I'm asking is that every time we vote on a politician, obviously we haven't had a libertarian, you know, in a high up office since Ron Paul, but a lot of time we vote for a politician, they make these promises of, say, Trump, for example. The whole reason why, which is officially done with Trump, was when he didn't pardon Julian Assange or Ross Ulbricht or Snowden, like, and all of these different things, like stay out of the Middle East, stop going to war, stop funding other countries' wars, like other people's business. And he didn't follow those promises that were like the core of his 2016 election. It's a whole reason a lot of people didn't vote for Hillary. A lot of Bernie supporters voted for Trump over Hillary because he promised to pardon Assange. So how can we, like, why don't we live in a system where we can vote based on just principles and no people speaking for us?
Yeah, parties are terrible, for sure.
Yeah.
And the higher you go in the system, the less of an impact your vote is going to have. So the much more local elections, a lot of them don't even include party affiliation. So school board elections are not party affiliates. You know, most of the town representatives are not affiliated with a party. And if you follow that line of logic, I think the next reasonable step is for New Hampshire to secede.
Yeah.
I guess. Let's just jump
I
right
love
into it, you know?
balkanism. It makes
I like
me
how
so
you just
excited.
dropped that bomb, Rachel. You were like, wait, secession is the obvious
And by the way,
choice.
I think balkanism is the only way anything is going to get better. Like, honestly, we're not just a country divided into two parties, left or right. We are a country completely divided with all different sorts of mindsets. Like, balkanization is the only way. But the only thing we're going to be able to do that is to get everyone else of a different mindset on board, which is why I'm so big on the left and right, liberals, libertarians, conservatives, communists, socialists, to sort of come together and recognize, yeah, this system is not working for any of us. Like, there is no reason two parties should be running 50 states. Like, there is no reason.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think that I think that every single person has to make a choice when they decide who to vote for, and every single person, unfortunately, gets to decide by what metric they're going to cast their vote, whether that be Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, or not at all, or for someone else. And I think until people understand that you have to be willing to allow one of the major two parties to lose in order to give your vote to the Libertarian Party when it's aligned more with your principles. And I think that this is the stumbling block for a lot of people. They think, well, if I vote Libertarian, that means the Democrats going to win and they're all really bad. And yes, the Democrats do suck, but guess what? The Republicans suck too. And they suck in equal measure to the Democrats. And it is not better to have a sucky Republican in office over a sucky Democrat in office. They're doing exactly the same thing. And so the message I think we need to start sending is every single time you make an unprincipled vote for either the Republicans or the Democrats, you're stealing votes from the Libertarian Party, which is really where your hearts lie. And we all know that. And so stop throwing your votes away to the two major parties and give it to us, because the more the Libertarians get votes, the more people are going to believe that we actually can win someday.
So to step away from politics for just a moment, when you were explaining why you all started off as leftists, you gave a lot of reasons that had to do with your family, with your communities, with your knitting group, with your stand-up venue. How has being of a freedom mindset and finding the wider liberty community affected your personal life?
It's made it 1,000 times better. To be honest, the Liberty community in New Hampshire is amazing. It is one of the most robust communities I've ever been a part of. There's literally a different Liberty event every single day of the week. And so I think, for me, it actually, one of the things I think is not talked about in terms of libertarian culture enough is the amount of creativity that exists in this space that just does not exist with either the Republicans or the Democrats. So you're very literally taking a whole bunch of self-imposed limits away and allowing yourself to think more freely and explore more ideas that you have never explored otherwise. And I think the creativity bit of the libertarians and also the in-person culture, especially that we have in New Hampshire, has been absolutely game-changing in terms of my life. I have better friendships now than I've ever had in my life. I have more actual in-person adult human friends that I've ever had in my life. I know I have a community that I can count on and that will have my back, and I'll be there for them every step of the way too. And that is something that I never experienced on either the left or the right.
It's definitely something that's taught me how to communicate better and how to talk with people of different ideas than I am. It's actually really taught me that, the great quote, the only thing that I know is I know nothing, because I'm constantly meeting people who I am talking with who have different ideas than me, and a lot of times they prove me wrong. My boyfriend, for example, is extremely more conservative than I am, I would say, on many issues. Well, not conservative, just like in... What would you call yourself, babe? Okay. But it's also kind of like, so when I went into conservative media, it really was a huge rift in my family, above all because they're extremely liberal, but because I've just gone in with more of the mindset of freedom for everyone and valuing every human being, even if I may not understand their background, I've kind of been able to learn with different types of people of all different backgrounds, political ideologies, and it's really made me realize that humans are a lot more alike than we realize, and there's a lot more love and compassion that could really save a lot of us if we just work together.
I think there's a couple of ways to answer this. So I was actually working this idea out earlier in a different talk, but there's not that many second, third, or fourth generation libertarians. They exist, but there's not very many of them. And that pipeline, that dearth of a pipeline, is really challenging. But in a lot of ways, it also provides this huge benefit. Like almost every single person in this room, raise your hand if you found libertarianism on your own, you weren't born into it. Yeah, so just almost every single person here. So that means that almost every single person here found new information and changed their mindset. Every single person here is willing to adopt new ideas when they come across information that contradicts their previous ideas. And I think that that self-selecting bias means that there's a huge difference in the population here and the population at large of rationality, of reasonability, and of curiosity. And so, you know, we just are better people. But I do think...
Way to appeal to the crowd there, Rachel.
That's all of you, man.
Okay. No, but I do think mimetically it's really valuable to teach libertarianism to the next generation. And that is how philosophies grow and prosper, is through generational learning. And so, you know, I've interacted with a number of, you know, people who are kind of my parents' age when they come here and they hear me say things that are freedom-oriented or liberty-minded, and they're like, oh man, I wish you were my kid. And I'm like, oh man, I wish you were my parents. You know, like, it goes both ways. Like, we need to be developing these cross-generational information transitions, and we also need to be part of the Breedom for Freedom program. Yeah. So, have more kids, you know?
Did you say Breedom for Freedom?
Freedom for freedom.
Have more kids. Teach them liberty. Teach them the nap.
Yeah. You should learn the nap when you're still napping.
Yep.
Sorry, bad joke. So, as Rachel pointed out, everyone here came to these ideas about freedom and liberty and changed their mind from a previous mindset. What advice would you give to anyone in the audience who has a friend who's in that place of maybe they're Republican, maybe they're Democrat, but they've realized that they're not getting the whole story. They're really mad. They're feeling disenfranchised by the culture and the political narrative that they're coming from. How do you recommend that the people here reach out to those friends? What resources or steps do you suggest they take?
I think that the very first thing you need to know about helping to wake your friends and family up is that it is a long, slow process. It is not something that is going to happen in a single conversation, even if they're already kind of feeling disenfranchised, because for what your goal should be is just to plant a seed. You know, give them a book to read, give them an article to read, you know, show them something that's contradictory to their worldview, and then leave them alone to let them think about it and let them work it out. Because when it comes to changing your mind, even if you are a relatively open-minded person, it is a process of overcoming the cognitive dissonance that you have to deal with your entire life to really wrap your head around the fact that the media has lied to you your entire life. I remember the moment that it happened for me, that the cognitive dissonance was really bad, and it was right after that Trump rally. I was literally sitting in my car on the side of a street in Manchester, New Hampshire, and the dissonance was so bad that I had a headache, and I was like, no, none of this can't be real. Like, what is going on? Because you have to understand that when your friend acknowledges that they've been lied to their entire lives by the media, it's a process where they have to, like, if they admit one thing is a lie, the entire world comes crumbling down around them, and then they have to kind of go back and reverse engineer, like, what else was I lied to about? What else was I lied to about? I was having a conversation with some members of my locals community on our Zoom like several months back, and someone brought up Ted Kaczynski's like manifesto, as just we were talking about different kind of like extremist material and things like that. And I really had to pause and go, was I told the truth about the Unabomber? Because you really do start to examine everything. And so the best piece of advice I can give when you have friends that are red pilling or waking up is that you have to allow them to go at their pace. Don't get frustrated with them. Don't insult them. Just let them go at their pace and let them come to you with questions. and then be there as that trusted source to help them navigate it, because it really is a deeply traumatic experience when you first red pill. And you know, most people just they don't approach it with the gentleness that's required, because we're so used to just fighting each other every day back and forth. So just let them come at their own time.
I would just simply say, hey, aren't you sick and tired of voting between two lesser than two evils? Like, doesn't it get tiring? I mean, every 2 to 4 years, every election, we go in and we vote between the warmonger with the red tie and the warmonger with the blue tie. And I think it comes down to the fact that I think we all, pretty much everyone that I've talked to, all agrees that nothing is changing and nothing is going to change until we stop giving to the system between voting between the guy with the R next to his name and the guy with the D next to his name. Because nothing's going to change if you keep forcing a habit over and over again. I think that's just how I approach it. And I think giving them the different option is really up to them. But with that discourse of talking about how we need to have another option, how we need to fight the current system, that's all you really need to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To me, I would say the most important thing to do is to admit that you were wrong also about something. And I think in our culture we have this really incredible stigma, negative stigma about flip-flopping, you know, that kill Romney.
You're a grifter. This is your new grift. No, I changed my mind like human beings are supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like, it's okay to admit that you were wrong. It's okay to learn new information and change your philosophy. Like, that's not a bad thing. That means that you're a dynamic individual who is, you know, not just like an NPC. And so, you know, giving them kind of an example of like, here was an assumption that I had. I did some research. Here's the research that I did. You can see it for yourself. This is the new conclusion that I came to. And to kind of demonstrate, like, here's how people walk through gathering information and changing their minds and like making it a personal thing. And then they can kind of relate to you. So for me, like, providing that sort of empathy, that point of empathy, is critical.
So you don't trust the plan?
Oh, gosh.
Wow.
I don't follow the political science.
4D chess,
Oh, no.
4D chess.
He's coming back, you guys, I promise you.
Oh, God.
Orange Jesus is on his way, don't worry.
Okay, well, we are just about out of time, which I'm afraid means we will not be taking Q&A right now. What are you looking forward to for the rest of your day at PorcFest? Where can people find you if they have questions?
Yeah, I'm spending most of my time in the Mises Caucus tent, so that is usually where you'll be able to find me. And I just want to say, if you are a registered voter in the state of New Hampshire and you have not yet signed a petition to put Jeremy Kauffman and I on the ballot, Jeremy Kauffman is, of course, running for United States Senate. I am running for governor in New Hampshire. Please stop by the tent and sign a petition for us if you're registered to vote in New Hampshire, because they make us go through the ridiculous process of collecting like 5,000 signatures to even appear on the ballot. And so every signature helps, and we really appreciate that. But that's where you'll mostly be able to find me for the rest of PorcFest.
I will also be at the Mises tent, just because Clint will probably be talking my ear off about ESG for the next 2 hours. Yeah, but I used to be in political media for a long time, and now I kind of just do movie reviews. But if you want to talk about politics with me, movies, TV shows, anything, the weather, I'm always there. I'm happy to talk with anyone about anything. I consider myself an open book, so yeah.
I'll probably be on the playground. They have face painting.
What?
Look.
I want my face painted.
All right, any last thoughts?
I mean, I think, you know, just for, when I first joined the Libertarian Party, it was a little bit of a rough entry in that some people were really happy that I was there, and let's just say some people were very unhappy that I was there. I would say for everyone who's a part of it, like when new people come in, try to welcome them, because it is stepping outside of your comfort zone to join something new, and it can be, the Libertarians can be rough, let's just be honest. There's lots of bickering, there's lots of posts on the internet, we all know exactly what I'm talking about, and just welcome them and say a few nice words, because if someone, like, you know, spoiler alert, no one is joining the Libertarian Party to grift. You guys suck for
There's
grifting.
so much money in this. What are you talking about?
There's so much money in becoming a public libertarian, let me tell you what. But if they're doing it, they're taking a chance and they're pushing outside their comfort zone, and be there to help them and help them with resources, help them to understand what it's about. It's gonna just, that's how we expand what we're doing, and that's how we bring more people in.
Thank you for having me, kind of a lefty up here, but I just want to say to be kind, eat your vegetables, and yeah, I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks, guys. Cool.
All right, thank you, everyone.